You shoot me in a dream, you better wake up and apologize.
The Cinik Radio Podcast.
Hi, I'm Chad L. Coleman, Tyrese from The Walking Dead, and Cuddy from The Wire, and you are listening to the Cinik Radio Podcast. Here your host, Cinik.
We live in great times because the internet has given the world a voice, but other than complaining, it seems like they have absolutely nothing to say.
Igrihe.
It's going to be a really good time.
And Ryan.
Batman vs. Superman is objectively better than Infinity War.
IG, did we just forget Kim?
You guys completely suck.
This is the greatest show of all time.
You are listening to episode 119 of the Cinik Radio Podcast, and I'm your host, Cinik. And joining me, as always, my co-host, Igrihe and Ryan. And on this week's show, make sure you keep the lights on, check under your bed, and close the closet door, because we are here to review It Chapter 2. Guys, the summer is just about over. It's time to put the action-packed car chases and explosions away and bring out the pumpkin spice everything, because it's fall and now officially horror season. And I, for one, couldn't be more excited about it. But Ryan, we're going to review it. Let's talk about some clowns, okay? I mean, when did this phenomenon known as chlorophobia start? I mean, when did we stop laughing at clowns and starting being terrified by them?
Yeah, I've kind of known clowns as both. I think ever since I was a child, like there was an aspect of clowns that were, you know, you see them at parties and they were fun and something that kids loved. But then at the same time, there were movies, you know, from when I was a kid, you know, about kind of killer clowns and evil clowns. So, you know, I guess they make for this really interesting thing because it's kind of duality with them that they are fun, loving, and they can bring out joy, but they are weird looking. Like, who looks like that? And so it kind of makes for something that you can take the joy from your childhood and turn it into something evil and horrible and terrifying. The good ones do a really good job of it, and the bad ones kind of just, it's clunky and looks ridiculous.
Yeah, we have one that's local, and the guy goes to parties dressed already in clown gear. So if you see him at a red light, he's just sitting there in full clown makeup, and it's just hilarious because he looks like the most miserable guy in the world. And I guess I would be too if I had to cover myself up in that stuff and take abuse from toddlers and have people throw candy apples at me. I don't think I'd be really happy either. IG, do you think pop culture is to blame, from Pennywise to the killer clowns from outer space to Twisty from American Horror Story? Did Hollywood kill clowns as we know it?
I think Hollywood and the internet, because I think it became cool to be afraid of clowns for a lot of people. And that's something that I've noticed. Like, even my oldest daughter, she's like, oh no, clowns scare me. And I tested that theory by putting some things in her way just to see the reaction. You know, I went and found somebody who had a big, like, clown statue and just stuck it outside of her room to try and intimidate her.
For strictly scientific purposes, right?
Absolutely, scientifically. You know, I'm just kind of getting a focus group started and seeing what's going on. And, like, it startled her because I could have put anything there. Like, if I would have just, like, stuck a piñata there, she'd have went, ha! So... but it's cool, right? To think clowns are scary because that's the internet these days. Fuck clowns. But, you know, the fact remains she still went on purpose and sat in a theater and saw this. So if you're really afraid of clowns, are you going to go sit in a 3-hour-long movie starring a clown? I don't think so. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me when people say, oh, I'm afraid of clowns, and then they go watch it. Or Killer Clowns from Outer Space, which I'm willing to bet there's a lot of people who haven't seen, and if you haven't, like, it's great. Like, it's so campy and stupid, and you really should watch it.
I've been to Universal a couple times for their Nights of Horror, and the 2 times that I've gone, they've actually had Killer Clowns from Outer Space as one of the exhibits in the park. So you have a lot of the characters walking around in their movie grade props and movie grade costumes. So it's kind of fun. I've got a lot of good pictures of them scaring people. And what I like is that if you ask them to, they have to break character. So whenever somebody comes running at me or charging at me or menacing me, I just ask them a simple question like, hey man, where can I get a Coke around here? And they're always like, oh, around the corner to the left. Or I had one guy from the Purge exhibit, and he was really going crazy with his chainsaw and yelling and screaming. And I'm just looking at him. I'm like, dude, do you know where the bathroom is? And he's like, oh, yeah, man. He puts the armor on. He's like, you just go around the corner over here and take a left, and the bathrooms are right there. So it's fun to mess with them that way. Ryan, we have had a lot of iterations of clowns throughout the years, from scary to funny. But what's been your favorite?
It's kind of cheating, only because, like, I think the Joker would probably come, you know, in a number of different iterations. it would be my favorite, but it's kind of not fair, so I'm trying to think. Honestly, I loved Pennywise from the first, not to give away my thoughts on this compared to the first, but I think I really loved Pennywise from the first It. I just love the performance. And I think that was really terrifying in a way that I don't know that this ever quite lived up to, but I'm going to go with Pennywise from the first It, the first of these two movies.
How about you, IG? What's your favorite clown?
Oh, it's got to be Shakes the Clown. That movie was messed up. Bobcat Goldthwait playing an alcoholic clown. Second choice, probably you have to be Ronald McDonald just because he's been around forever. He's, my childhood hero, had a great friend in Grimace.
Mine probably is Twisty from American Horror Story. The costume work and how violent he was as a character. Definitely one of the better seasons and one of the better characters they've ever put out of that show. I think that show has kind of fallen off in quality, and that's why we don't cover it. But it is always good for a nice scare. IG, Pennywise was played once again by Billy Skarsgård. Does he fill Tim Curry's shoes, acting-wise and being terrifying?
In this role, I think he absolutely does. I think there's just something about how he plays this role that is just menacing, terrifying, and just the right amount of creepy. And that stupid lip thing he does, for whatever reason, when he's able to just drool out of it, really just does hit that spot of it's just off-putting. And I think that's what you need to accomplish with this role, is being off-putting really kind of gets you set in the mood. So, yeah, I think that as great as Tim Curry was in the very original It, I think Bill Skarsgård here does just an amazing job as Pennywise.
Well, you can see me do that actual drool thing if we're ever at the airport and I see a Cinnabon. It's just automatic. I don't think about it. It just kind of happens. I see a Cinnabon and I just start drooling all over the place. You get me one of those fresh with an extra package of icing and I'm in fat boy heaven.
I like the pecan roll myself. Those are the better ones.
The movie opens in what is perhaps the worst carnival date since my 7th grade sweetheart drank too much lemonade and threw up all over my brand new sneakers on the Fierce wheel. Thanks a lot, Kara. Ryan, you are our resident martial arts expert and the closest thing to an action hero that we know. And I know that our friends from the LGBT community are just tired of being bullied, and I don't blame them. I'm tired of them getting bullied. But let's talk about the conventional wisdom of talking smack in a 5-on-2 situation. Should our starstruck lovers just kept walking?
At the end of the movie, I was just like, what was the purpose of that scene? Only because it seemed gratuitous in it's like we've seen that scene in a million movies over the years and TV shows. And it just seemed like gratuitous just for the sake of it. Like those bullies never got their comeuppance unless I missed something. So it's kind of like, that's one of those things you set up to like get comeuppance, or if you don't, there's some reason for it. But it just seemed like, okay, why, do that? Like it just didn't, I don't know, just something about it didn't work. And if there was a meaning behind it, to me, it didn't seem to make any sense. And I mean, there is something to like talking shit to somebody and not showing weakness, but at the end of the day, he still got dumped in the river, yeah, I don't know. It's just that my first thing I said to my wife when the movie ended is I was like, wait, did anything happen to those bullies from the beginning of the movie? Like that, I just like they didn't, nothing. It just bugged me.
So would you have felt better about the whole situation if they would have took 30 seconds for them to also get justifiably killed by Pennywise?
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, at least give us that or give us something. It just, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's in the book. And there are times to subvert expectations. Like that is definitely a moment where like when it happens, I'm thinking, well, these guys are going to be important later on in the movie and they're going to get their comeuppance because that's the kind of character that happens to. But they're so one-dimensional and it was so ridiculous that I was like, I don't know, it just struck me as weird in this day and age with the level of kind of maturity we have as viewers to an extent that they would just throw that in there. So I just figured, okay, something's going to happen. And yeah, it's like, at least give us something. Cause otherwise it feels gratuitous. It feels unnecessary. Didn't have to do it to a gay couple, unless again, there was no reason for that to work. And I'm not like, I know there was like some outrage and I'm not like outraged by it. I'm just like, it's just weird. It's like just not something you expect in a movie today without anything else, and again, it's just nothing about it for me works. There's no reason for it to subvert expectations. It was just kind of there. And I don't understand why.
IG, football season has just started, and we all know the term Monday morning quarterback. And we all like to say to ourselves, in that situation, I would have. But you and your significant other have just been attacked and beaten. You get the lesser of it, and you see the person you care about tossed over a bridge. Would you casually walk down the embankment to save her? I mean, didn't Don seem a little laissez-faire about saving Adrienne in this unfortunate turn of events?
Yeah, I mean, when your significant other gets tossed over a bridge, I mean, I guess maybe it depends on, the height of the bridge, but I might be moving with a little more pep in my step to try and get there. And so, yeah, the inability to really kind of get after that. Now, I understand you just got a little bit of an ass whooping, but I've had an ass whooping or two in my lifetime, and I've still been able to move if I need to once I took one. I just think that there are some directing choices and some things that they did in this movie, and I'm not sure if this came from the book or where it came from, or if they decided to put it in to try and draw in some extra viewers, but something just isn't right about it. Something seems a little off, and I'm just hoping that maybe there's a director's cut or something that's going to come out of this later that's really going to do some of the stuff. But yeah, I just can't believe that you watch your significant other just get the absolute worst of it and then get thrown over, and you just lazily move yourself down the hill to go get him.
Yeah, he did absolutely nothing. And I mean, he took maybe a third of a beating that his boyfriend did. There was one guy holding him down, and then he gets tossed over the bridge, and the boyfriend's kind of like bobbing in the water, and he's just looking over the bridge like, oh, I should really get down there and get him. I worked with this guy named Devin who moves slow all the time, regardless of the circumstances. And it just made me feel like Devin was sliding down the bank to save his boyfriend. It was pretty bad.
Hey, welcome to the show, Devin.
Yeah, hey, what are you doing? Since the last movie was 2 years ago, Ryan, and we jumped 27 years into the future, which seems kind of a random number to me for a killer clown to appear. It's like, oh, exactly 27 years and he's back. We needed a new cast. Older aged cast had some acting heavyweights, including James McAvoy, Bill Hader, and Jessica Chastain. Do you believe that they did the lovable losers justice?
Not really. I feel like the group of kids that they got for that first movie were so good and so interesting and different, and they really individually, their personalities all kind of shined, and you really saw how each person, it was like pieces of a puzzle, and they were all very unique and fit that very uniquely. And while you're right, like we had acting heavyweights here, outside of Bill Hader, nobody really stood out to me as like, yeah, that was a great performance. Nobody was bad. They were all, they were all great actors. So there's in no way were any of the performances particularly bad. But you have a guy like James McAvoy who just seemed kind of like muted mostly throughout, and we know what he's capable of. So like, I just feel like they didn't live up to kind of what those kids kind of set up for them. And yeah, so it's hard to say, like they weren't bad, but did they do justice? Not really, because I just don't think it was as good as the first movie.
I was really excited to see James Ransom, who played Eddie, the older version of Eddie, because he was kind of one of the main characters in The Wire season 2. He had a big part throughout the season, and he was a younger guy and kind of brash and kind of funny, but he's bounced around and got some roles, but this is probably the biggest thing I've seen him in.
That's who it is. I was like, I recognize him from somewhere. You're right. It's from The Wire. Yeah.
So if you want to see him at the beginning of his career, that's where you would be able to check him out. He's a good actor, but hasn't really gotten a lot of work. And it was good to see kind of him. IG, we all want to root for the underdog. And in the first movie, there was no bigger underdog than the new kid on the block, Ben. But I call this the Ben problem. There was one character choice that just kind of made me cringe. Ben suddenly went from unlikable fat boy to hot, successful architect with abs for days. Was that a little too on the nose for you? Or were you okay with the casting?
No, I didn't like it. I think that it actually took away from the character. Because what you were trying to do then is put eye candy on the screen, right? Make something look nice just for the sake of making it look nice. Because what it's saying is like you can't be comfortable. You can't be heavy and be okay with who you are. And, really, you can lose weight. I mean, if you really want to, you don't have to be heavy. But this kid, when he was young Ben, he had all kinds of charisma and he was fun to listen to and he was interesting. And the older one just wasn't. Like, there was nothing to write home about. There was nothing, like, it wasn't acted poorly, but it didn't have the amount of pull that the original had. And so it really, it was too much on the nose. And I mean, it made me think of Central Intelligence with The Rock, right? Where his character in high school was kind of fat and a loser and everything else. And then he comes back and he's like, he's The Rock. And he's like, yeah, all I did was work out 6 hours every day for the last 20 years. So really, so you're going to go do that just because you're tired of people calling you names or whatever. It just really struck a chord that let's not have characters be who they are. Let's try and say, look, if you really try hard, you can reinvent yourself. But do you really need to? Because that first kid, he was smart and he was, charismatic, and I loved him. And this was just not him.
Younger kid was played by an actor named Jeremy Ray Taylor, and he, even at his young age, could act circles around Jay Ryan, who played the older version of him. Jay Ryan just wasn't a very good choice for the part. I didn't like the direction that they took with it, and I don't think he really could act very well. What do you think, Ryan?
It made for a funny gag. We see the guy in the conference room and we assume that it's him, and then it turns out it's this other guy. It doesn't bug me so much that, because I'm assuming maybe that in the book, again, I haven't read the book, so I don't know, but it kind of would make sense that, okay, he had a huge crush on her. Maybe she looked past him because he was a little overweight, and then surprise, surprise, he's fit and in great shape, and maybe that dynamic can make for something interesting, and interesting storytelling. I think this story, even though it was like 18 hours long, didn't seem to have time to really give us focus much on that. So it kind of allowed us to assume that stuff was going on, but really didn't give us much to work with. I just think, like the performance he was just kind of boring. I don't know if it was him as an actor or the, what he was given to work with, the direction or what, but just like, he was just boring. And so, I'd rather have had an actor that looked more like the kid that would have given us something interesting, because that kid was really good. Like I said, again, all the cast was good. And so, he was just like, he just didn't give us much. So it was just kind of like, okay, yeah, all right, I get it. He's good looking. He's in great shape. But, so you picked it had a mediocre performance just so you can give us that sight gag. It didn't work.
Yeah, about the only good part about it was Bill Hader's line that he looked like every Brazilian soccer player rolled into one.
Well, yeah, exactly. But he had some great lines with that. And so, it's like, okay, that works. But that's about it.
IG, we cut back to the first movie and the kids agreeing to the oath of going back to Derry if Pennywise wasn't truly dead. They would just come back and finish the job, and then they cut their hands, very symbolic. But in a world that you can't get people to drive you to the airport a week after they agree to do it, would you believe for a second people would come back for the second go around with the clown?
No, mostly because that was a very traumatic experience. But, there is something to be said about when you go through something very deeply. I mean, it's the reason why a lot of people go to high school reunions, right? It was a big part of their life. So this, I would assume, just by what the experience seemed like, maybe even more important to who they become later in life based on what they went through. So maybe just based on that they went through all this together, they'd want to. They'd be drawn to come back together. But I can't believe that they'd get everybody, because there's also those people that you were the closest friends with in high school that you're like, hey, man, you coming to the reunion? They're like, fuck you. I don't ever want to see you again. And I would assume that having been tortured by some crazy clown that lives in a sewer might drive at least one of those people to go, no, I'm not coming to that.
Yeah, not one of them had a party to go to or any of the number of excuses. Oh, I got a wedding that weekend. I just can't come. 27 years is a long time to hold an oath. I mean, most people can't do anything for 27 years, let alone stick to their word. But Ryan, Mike, who remained in Derry his whole life, unfortunately, reaches out to the squad as we get to see the losers as adults. They all had different but similar reactions to this dreaded call. What would your reaction be if Mike called you and said, hey, Ryan, it's time to go back to Derry?
Yeah, I'm not going back. I would have some excuse, or I'd have podcast obligations or something. But yeah, there's no, it's like you beat him once. There's no way I'm going back in there to try to do it again. Oh, and yeah, what? So how many of them died? So of the whole Losers Club, 2 out of 7 died? That's not good odds. So yeah.
So you're not going to do the Pacquiao thing? Take a second round in there and get beat up the second time?
I'm good. I mean, what happens? Okay, he just feeds on people in dairy. I'll just stay away from there. So I'm good.
But the movie did have some important logical problem solving, because what logical person, like Ryan just said, would think, why the fuck would I go back there? Oh, because we forgot everything that happened. Check. And then, this is a bad idea. I remember exactly what happened. I just want to leave. Well, if you die, then you're facing a horrible death either way. So IG, did they do a good job problem solving there? And would that be enough for you to stay?
I'm with Ryan. No. That's not enough. No again. No 3 times. I think I have to get my dog to the shampooer this weekend. Something else. I don't know what it is, but I don't know. Just knowing that there's some murderous, rampaging, shape-shifting, big-toothed clown running around that drools out of his lip, because even when there is no Cinnabon around, just makes me think that, yeah, that's not the place I want to be. Like, if I knew ahead of time, like, the standard person response is like, hey, something is haunted, I want to go see that. That's cool. Like my oldest daughter says that stuff all the time. I'm like, if something is really haunted, I don't want any part of that. Like, and I don't believe in ghosts, but if I found out something is really haunted, I'm not going there, like, ever. For any reason. Like, there better be a large monetary incentive to spend 12 minutes there, and then maybe.
Yeah, I don't so much believe in ghosts, so I don't believe in things that are haunted. But if I knew something was haunted, I certainly wouldn't go seek it out. It's like, hey, you want to spend a weekend in this sanitarium where a whole bunch of crazy people died? No, that's a hard pass for me. Thanks.
Well, I kind of, having lived that experience a little bit, because and we'll talk maybe more about this when we review Dr. Sleep, but we stayed at the Stanley Hotel, which is the hotel that Stephen King got the inspiration for The Shining. When he stayed there one night, and that's what kind of started him on writing the movie. And it very much looks like the Overlook Hotel from The Shining. And I think, in fact, this miniseries, they actually filmed it at that hotel. But anyway, we did a ghost tour. Like, they have a haunted tour where they tell you about all these stories. And I'm I don't believe in any of that stuff, but it definitely was like, they were like, we were on the 4th floor, and like, yeah, and the 4th floor is the most haunted because that's where all the kids were. The kids ghosts, and they run around, they like pull your sheets off, and they do all kinds of stuff. And so even me, who's not scared of stuff, was like, why are we staying here again? And was a little like nervous, once we, like, at some point we got up to the room, my wife, I forget what happened, but she like went to the bathroom or left or something. And I was like, I don't want to be here alone. This is a little creepy. So yeah, it's like, there's this gut thing inside of us that even if we don't believe in ghosts, we believe, you still can't help but have an emotional reaction, especially if you're told, like, yeah, this place is haunted.
At any point, did you shout zoinks and jump into your wife's arms?
Although what I did do, because she was even more scared than me, is like, at some points I was like trying to egg on the ghosts. I was like, come on, show up. Like, what's going on? Like, we paid all this money to stay here. No, and she was like, stop it. Don't antagonize the ghosts.
So she believes in ghosts, but you don't.
Yeah,
that's what I'm gathering.
Yeah.
Mine's the same way. Like, my wife totally believes in ghosts, and I'm like, are you nuts? Where?
Yeah, I wouldn't be shouting them down. Whether I believe in them or not, I wouldn't be challenging them. It's sort of like that guy that's mad at God, that he's like, oh, if there's a God, strike me down. Yeah, I'm not chancing that there is one. Exactly. I'm going to get a lightning bolt shot at me. IG, writer, architect, entrepreneur, risk management analyst. To say the losers experienced a lot would be an understatement. But did you find it a little troubling that they were all oddly winners in life, despite the PTSD that something like this would cause?
And it just doesn't seem right, because, I mean, what group of people, like more than 3 people together, what group that size isn't generally have more people working in gas stations in the TSA than CEOs and risk analysts? It just doesn't work that way, where, your whole circle of childhood friends all ends up in the same economic boat, as it were. And it seems like these guys all ended up just doing super well for themselves. And maybe that's due to Pennywise putting them in a position to have some kind of traumatic experience as children. But it still seems a little far-fetched. Like, you should really all be spending more of your time in an insane asylum and taking heavy doses of Ativan.
Yeah, even Stanley, who opted out and didn't come on the fail trip, I mean, he looked like he was living pretty well. His wife's booking Buenos Aires. He's got a nice wife, nice house. So they were all doing pretty well, except for Mike, who chose to stay in Derry on Pennywise watch, which I don't know how he drew the small straw on that one. But even then, he had a sweet pad above the library, and it looked like he had money in a car. So he was doing okay for somebody that didn't have any kind of gainful employment. Ryan, you're like me. You don't like these things to drag out, and I enjoyed the movie. But at 2 hours and 49 minutes long, could we have cut down the side trips to search for the personal relics and to remember fully what happened? I mean, was it necessary to show every single character?
I feel like in a book, yeah. In this case, they needed to cut something, and I don't know where, but yeah, it was dragging. I feel like by 2 hours, 10 minutes, I was checked out. Really, like, it was really long, and it felt like, that's the problem, I guess, when you have that many kind of quote main characters that you then Mike kind of got the shaft because
he really got 2 seconds of memory. So he looked at the door and they're like, all right, we're good.
Here's the thing, like when I realized that he was a narrator and he was the guy kind of getting the gang back together, I immediately said to my wife, like, he's so not going to be a big part, like an important part of this movie as far as like storytelling wise. Like, it's almost like he's getting thrown that bone because they didn't really go much into his backstory. There were large pockets of this movie where he just didn't do anything or he wasn't there. And so it's just kind of like, he still got the shaft, but yeah, it's like, but everybody else got like a good 10 minutes, it feels like, of just personal backstory and then their own little side adventure. While, again, we didn't get to see Mike's, and he was the one on It Watch, so like, or Pennywise Watch, as you said. So like, maybe we should have gotten a little bit of that, but yeah, it dragged, and I feel like there's a 2 hour and 10 minute movie in there that was much tighter and much more watchable.
Or even an hour and 50-minute movie.
Yeah,
honestly, right. Like, do we really need everything to be 3 hours? Like, I get why Avengers Endgame was 3 hours, because they'd spent, the better part of 10 years building into this. But this is the second iteration of a horror movie. Do we really need it to be 3 hours long? That's too much. And just like Ryan said, like, by the time we're eclipsing that 2 hour mark, I'm finding myself getting restless. It's really not doing it for me anymore. We're spending too much time building rather than having it just be scary. And I don't think the first one was near this long. I got to look.
And Endgame, it's like, that's a movie where, it's 20 some odd movies and 10 years of setup to that. So we were okay with it because we were invested, we're okay, but like this, it's like, okay, I get it. Like, give me something more interesting than this. This is, it's just dragging and boring. And we really didn't need that.
The first one was actually 2 hours and 15 minutes long, which isn't nearly as long as this, but I would prefer, rather than a director's cut, which is longer, that we get a Cinik, Ryan, and IG cut, which is about an hour and a half long, and we can go finish and go about our day and head over to Cinnabon. IG, we saw that Billy is still carrying a lot of guilt over Georgie's death, but during his flashback, is there any fucking way you're putting your arm in that storm drain, even if there's $1 million down there?
Nope, that $1 million survives on its own. It lives to fight another day. I know he really feels bad about it, but, you still have to understand it's not your fault. And I'm sure that he has gotten past it in his life. But my goodness, like, first of all, they couldn't get the same kid because, like, from that age, they're going to age very quickly. So that kid doesn't look like Georgie did when he died. So that would have been enough to throw me out of it at that point and go, no, that's not Georgie. We're good. And secondly, it's like, I've been through this before. Something seems really familiar. So, yeah, I'm not going in there. I'm not sticking my hand in there. I'm not going to poke a stick in there. I'm not doing anything with it.
If anything, I'll take a leak in there just to tell Pennywise to have a good day. But other than that, I'm not going anywhere near that storm drain. Ryan, in Richie's journey, we found out that he had a love of Street Fighter and Eddie. Did you see that coming? And did him being in love with another part of the Losers add anything to his character?
Not really. Yeah, like, I mean, that felt a little bit, again, it felt unnecessary. And then it's like, setting up something that you then, we don't really have any don't really spend any time following up on it, if you're going to give us that. So I don't know. It just seemed like that was something that easily could have been cut and the movie would not have suffered for it. Probably would have been better.
One of the things I did like in the backstories is that people seem to run in circles. They live their lives in circles. And in Eddie's flashback, which was absolutely disgusting, it brought him back to the pharmacy and his mom. And Beverly's encounter brought her back to her old apartment where her dad lived. IG, as part of the human condition, we tend to live our life in circles. I mean, does it surprise you that Eddie married a woman that mirrored his mother and Beverly married a guy that was just like her abusive dad?
Yeah, well, they say that a lot of women, when they find someone to be their lifelong mate, tend to look for their fathers. And sometimes that's really not a good thing because sometimes, especially like in the older generations, fathers were very abusive and very cold and very distant. And so, and especially in this case, like the father was very abusive and sexually so, and very traumatic to a young girl's existence. To watch these things kind of happen where you're circle is so tight and you stay so much in it that you end up with another person in your life that way really kind of speaks to how some people just can't get out of their own way. And it does happen. I mean, I've seen it happen firsthand, but I've also seen people be able to get out of it eventually. And I'm hoping that like I myself have been able to get away from some of it. But, we'll see. That's what happens in life is we do that. I mean, I've lived many other places and ended up coming back to one of the coldest places in the country during the winter. And I did it on purpose. And I still don't know what's wrong with me.
You really lived in Hawaii and then you turned around and moved to Minnesota. If that ain't a masochist, I'm not sure what is. Ryan, Henry Bowers escapes the mental institution in grand and violent fashion with his awesome undead accomplice. It turned out to be a little more of a side note, much like some of the other things we talked about in the podcast. Did you expect more out of the story and the character?
Yeah, that was another thing. It's like it feels like there were ideas or things. Again, I kind of want to read the book now to compare it because it feels like there are things involved or included that were just kind of like half-assed thrown in there. And the first one was such a good, tight movie that I'm like having a hard time imagining that they would. That this one would be so kind of loose and things like unresolved and kind of things that felt like they were just kind of thrown in there or really not necessary story wise. So yeah, I don't know. It felt like another. It was kind of cool. His scenes were he was kind of funny and he was like an interesting character, but like again, it just felt a little unnecessary and weird and I don't know. I mean, just that. It contributed to the movie just dragging because it felt like this was either give him more of a role or don't involve him at all. Like they had their hands full with Pennywise. Like, why do they need this weird side character who really does zero? If he doesn't exist, everything happens the same way. Again, useless and unimportant to the plot.
Well, this movie tend to have more loose ends than the whole run of The Sopranos combined. Like, what happened to the lamp? What happened to the Russian guy out in the woods? Yeah. What happened? I mean, it's the same thing. It's, is that undead guy still sitting in the car waiting for Henry Bowers to come back so they can go to the next spot and plan the unsuccessful attack? Richie had a lot of funny lines throughout the course of the movie. But the funniest, without a doubt, was after Bowers' failed attack against Eddie when he told him he should just cut that mullet already. It's been like 30 years. Do you agree?
Oh, my God. So one of the most famous things that happens in Minnesota every winter is the state hockey tournament. And one of the things they do here during our state hockey tournament is they have the hockey hair contest where it's mullets for days. They're everywhere. And I can't believe after all these years, kids are still doing the mullet. Like that has somehow survived. Like they're able to like actually go to a barber and tell them that that's the kind of haircut they want. But it's somehow really just kind of put into the hockey community here in Minnesota. But yeah, like the mullet needs to die like very soon. It needs to just go away. I don't understand, the whole business in front, party in back attitude that goes with that hairstyle. It is quite honestly just terrible. It's a terrible hairstyle. And it's hilarious to watch it happen every winter here in Minnesota and tragic at the same time. So the fact that it's happening in this movie just gave me flashbacks to that, which is both happy and sad. altogether.
Ryan, Mike's plan was to use an ancient tribal ritual to stop the painted face menace. While this was all going on and they started dropping their relics into this leather pouch that they were about to set on fire, were you with me when you're sitting and thinking this has zero chances of working?
Yeah. Yeah. Although, and we have this, I complain about this with superhero movies too. Like, I feel like we're not given, we don't, it's kind of like vaguely explained why that might work, but we still don't really know fully what Pennywise's powers are, what he's able to do, what he's not, and what they're able to do, what are his weaknesses. And it seemed like, this isn't going to work, but by some movie magic and weird logic and something, they're just going to magically kind of find a way at the end. Which I mean, this isn't a problem just of it, but I think most movies, and maybe it's just an issue with movies in general, that, you can't explain, there's only so much exposition you can give, and there's only so much description of powers. But I wish there was a better explanation about exactly who he is and what his abilities are and what his weaknesses are and how to really defeat him. Because even so, like, you asked us earlier, like, if I was really in this position, sure, if we had a real clear, concise explanation of how I'm going to beat him, but the fact of the matter is, like, they're kind of relying on, like, this guy who was basically on an acid trip to do it. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I'll fight Brock Lesnar because I know that he's a terrible stand-up fighter, but I'm not going to fight Pennywise because I have no idea what the hell he's capable of. IG, do you think that the plan would have worked out a little better if they put quantum in front of it rather than Kajunk?
And well, that's the thing. They needed a little Doctor Strange or Ant-Man or something to come in and explain other items of physics to them. Because, the Kajunk or whatever, just, oh my God. Where are they finding their information that's what they think is going to be the thing that pushes them over the top in this? And you're really going to put all your ducks in that basket? It just seems so far-fetched. Like, first of all, even if they had forgotten everything, at that first sign of everything happening, like first iteration of it showing up and Pennywise doing things to them, they're adults. Get in your car and leave, man. Like, you don't need to stay. You can just go. Like, Losers Club. Well, I got a thing back somewhere else. What's that thing? It's Taco Tuesday and I have to go. So, like, you don't have to stay.
I don't know if we're allowed to say that anymore. I think LeBron patented Taco Tuesday for some reason. But I agree with you, which was kind of funny when Billy got the kid outside by the storm drain. He's like, just leave town. Kid's like, what, on my bike? I got to go to the fair, dude. I'm supposed to be at the fair. He's like, no, just leave and never come back. And this poor 12-year-old kid has a way to get out of town and to stay out of town because, God knows your parents just up and move when you tell them that you're hearing voices in the drain. Ryan, so it turns out Pennywise is butthead face, shape-shifting, three-lighted alien that feeds off of fear, sort of a cross between the monster from The Thing and Freddy Krueger. Reaction?
Freddy Krueger's a good example of, like, Freddy was kind of like, I guess it was, I got to watch the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. I feel like he was scarier initially and then became kind of campy. And I feel like Pennywise was really scary and effective in the first movie. And in this movie, it was kind of campy and just kind of, he just felt like a standard, movie villain, which, he had his moments, I guess. But, like, yeah, for the most part, it just seemed like he was not the same level of scary and terrifying and interesting as the first movie. And it was just, okay, he's giant, he's got spider legs, okay, he's chasing them, all right, what's going on? When are they just going to figure out some weird random thing that's going to defeat him? Oh yeah, they figured it out, they have to make him smaller. It's just like, it was boring, and there was nothing about that fight or battle that was scary, where the first one I feel like it was, and there were stakes, and you felt the stakes, and you were rooting for the Losers Club. But I think at this point I was just like, please just let it end. I don't care what you guys have to do, just or kill them all. Like, I was like, cool, you know what? Kill them all. I don't care. I just want this movie to end.
Wow, rooting for Pennywise. You are a maverick. IG, sadly, we lose Eddie, but the losers defeat Pennywise via bullying him and ripping his heart out of his chest. What exactly did we learn from all this? Bullies always win? Or it's okay to be gay as long as you don't tell anybody, at least in Derry? Or if your people from your past call, just change your number immediately.
Yes to all three. Yeah, you don't need to flaunt your gay and everybody, especially when you're in a movie from a small town, and everybody's going to judge you, which I think is stupid, especially because they put this movie out in 2019 where like it's almost preferred to be gay anymore, which is okay. They had their time where they were beat up all the time. But yeah, I wouldn't have given any of these people my number if there was any inclination like you have to come back here and fight this demon three-legged Freddy Krueger thing alien. I'm not coming. I'm not going, guys.
Ryan, is the evil clown truly dead, or will we get a sequel of the 70-year-old losers trying to beat Pennywise yet again?
I hope not. Like the sequelitis stuff just stop it. Like, you know what? They'll reboot it in 8 years probably, or there'll be a mini series or whatever. But like, yeah, we don't need another It sequel. And like, yeah, what are you gonna, what is Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart? Are they gonna be, are they gonna lead the next? No, they're probably still too old to lead the next iteration of Losers Club. But you get my drift.
That, though. Don't get me that. Like you're right. Watch that.
I said that.
Shall not pass.
I said that. I was like, that actually sounds pretty cool. So no, but we don't need another It movie. We're fine. We had 1.5 good movies. Like let's leave it alone.
IG, in the end, the losers win the day. We get a montage post-there. They go for a swim in the quarry. Your thoughts on the final battle against the giant spider Pennywise and your rating.
Well, like, let me start this. Like, I want to go back to Beverly in her old apartment where she grew up. And I want to throw a shout out to my grandmother from rolling out of her grave to chase her around naked in this, because that was about the creepiest thing in the whole movie. And my grandmother was scary enough when she was alive. So, kudos to her for rolling out and getting it done a second time. But the problem with the final battle is it took 2 hours and 40 minutes to get there. And by that time, I was done. I was checked out of this movie. They took so long building so many insignificant parts that when you get to the part that's supposed to matter, I didn't even care anymore. It was still fun to watch. I still had a good time watching it. I'm not going to go out of my way to watch it too many more times, but if it's on, I might watch it again. The final battle just it didn't hit for me. It didn't do as much as the last one where it was amazing and I thought everything was cool. And it seemed like they were playing on Dungeons and Dragons rules where it has to follow some certain kind of guidelines and able to do stuff, has to act like whatever character it's in or shape or whatever that the kids were saying. And I'm like, well, it's an alien. Why do you assume it has to follow whatever rules you're putting out in front of it? So I just thought that it was a little off-putting and a little too far into the movie. Like it needed to happen a different way. But that being said, quite honestly, Bill Hader is the standout star of this movie, and his character was really, really well done and really well acted. But the same really can't be said for anyone else in this movie, like at all, except for maybe Bill Skarsgård. But that's because just the way he performs that character is just unique. And I think that he's able to do it a second time, but they spent so much time not with Pennywise that it took away from Pennywise when he was on the screen. I did still like the movie. I just wish it could have been about a third less long. Like take a third of the movie off and we'd be good to go. So I'm going to give it a 7. I still enjoyed it, but I think it's just a little long in the tooth.
To piggyback off of Ig, I think performance-wise, I think Bill Hader is definitely the MVP of this movie. He was fantastic, and I think he's one of those actors, that he'll win an Oscar. I'm sure within the next 10 years, like he will win an Oscar. Also Skarsgård did a great job as Pennywise, but he just wasn't as I needed something new, and I guess we didn't get that. But the little bit we did get of him, especially when he was able to be a little creepy, and that it works. And when we got to see some of the Losers Club as kids, again they were great. But they just weren't in it very much. But they were great in it. But otherwise, the performances of the cast just didn't really stand out outside of that. I think the movie was really good for the first hour. I want to say I was really interested. The setup was really good. That first hour, the dynamic, them kind of getting back together, it works really well. But I think once they start kind of going on their side missions, that's where it really just starts to drag. And I think by the time it builds to what's supposed to be the climax, I was just beat. I was tired. I was bored, and nothing about that scene, it kind of felt very similar to the scene in the first movie, the uniqueness of that first one, and the, just the real stakes and the real fear and the real terror was just not there. So it just felt like, all right, this is the same thing, but just not as good, with actors who just aren't trying as hard. And, I think it did get the creep factor. Like, the effects were great. There were some super creepy things in this movie. Some of the creepiest, weirdest things I've seen in any movie. And I will give it that. And I say, again, strong first hour or so, and then it just kind of nosedives for me, and the ending was just boring. And I dozed off. At some point my wife kind of nudged me, and I'll give it a 6. It does, again, some decent performances. It did have a good first part, good effects, creepy, in spots, but just kind of does not hold up towards the end. And it easily could have shaved an hour off of this, and it would have been a stronger movie for that.
Interesting that you mentioned that, because when you go see UFC, if you watch UFC on pay-per-view, it's great. It's fun. It's exciting. If you go see UFC live, there's about 10 to 15 matches that they don't show on TV. And by the time you get to the main card, you're wore out. Like, it's hard to get up for the main event because you've sat through 2 or 3 hours of people punching each other in the face. And I really felt that Bill Skarsgård, he deserved better. Pennywise as a villain deserved better, because he's visually brilliant in that role. And there's something extremely scary about the look in his eyes, that he's one of the better villains we've had in a long time. The whole mashup thing kind of was truly a letdown for me. I didn't like that. I didn't like that he's a little bit of this villain, a little bit of that villain, and we can shout him down and he'll just die. I thought that was really weak, that we're just going to talk him out of being the eater of worlds and turn him into what looked to be like football with eyes. I loved McAvoy. He's always a home run. I mean, he might have been a little more laid back, but I think that was just the role. Bill Hader is a god amongst men, and I agree with you when you say that he's probably going to win an Academy Award at some point. This movie was so freaking long. It's a horror film. Scare us, make us laugh, kill a few characters, and let the good guys win, and we can be done with it. I don't need to be there so long that I'm legally common law married to the stranger that's sitting 2 seats away by the time I leave the movie. I just want to have a little bit of fun, and I want to move on with my life. It had some good humor. It had some good gore. The visual effects were great, and it kept me on the edge of my seat. Maybe not as much as the first one. So I give chapter 1 a 7, but I am excited about all the amazing content we have coming up. And this time around, we're actually going to cover some horror films.
And that's it. You made it to the end of another episode of the Cinik Radio podcast. I'm Igrihe, here with Cinik, who you can find at CINIKRADIO.com. Also, we had Ryan, who you can find at thejimwits.com, and Kim, who you can find at KMCArtworks.com. Great artists. Go check out some really cool stuff. We'll be back next week with some new stuff for you, probably some news as well. Send your crazy news stories, any comments, questions, and concerns to us at CINIKRADIO@gmail.com. Find us on the internet at CINIKRADIO.com. Look for us on Facebook at Facebook.com/CINIKRADIO. Find us on Twitter at CINIKRADIO. And find us on Instagram at CINIKRADIO. You can also head over to tpublic.com, search for Cinik, CINIK, and get your own Cinik Radio podcast gear. T-shirts, mugs, cups, stickers, all the cool Cinik Radio podcast stuff you could possibly want. It'd help the show, and we would greatly appreciate it. Thanks again for all the love and support. Keep listening, sharing it with your friends, like, listen, and subscribe. And until next time, don't get captured.
Follow the podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and at CINIKRADIO.com. Available for download on iTunes.